It's the easiest of all. But talking really, we want to make a drawing. All of you are artists of different levels, and you want to do this damn useful correct, these drawings. So what do you have to do? What do you represent it? First, we need to know that we are beings of stories. All our communication is story-based. We have structured thinking to tell things to other people. So, for example, I want to tell my mother a lie, so I have to think about the story that feels believable, so they don't cuff me when I'm doing this. Yeah, and there is a mental process there. So let's understand first what's the story, and when we have this story thing kind of work it out, we can think about visuals. So we all heard this story was once upon a time, blah 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 blah, and then the hero blah blah blah, and then he struggles, and then he saves everybody. Yeah. All classic stories and all modern stories have 3 moments that repeat themselves over and over and over and over again. What are these moments? The first one is called exposition. Yeah, exposition, it's the part in my storytelling when I'm telling you, all right, these are the characters, this is the location, this is the world, are the laws, all this works. In a drawing and still drawing, this part will be just picking what elements you want to expose there. I want to put a man, a woman, a husband, a wife, whatever I want to put, I will put it there. Yeah. So, wait a second. They have an important call, so don't go yet. Give me 2 minutes. All right, problem solved. Yes, it was the cat going out. All right, exposition. For example, if you saw Star Wars, do you remember the first scene was this? Yes, no more time. The first scene was this part of the letters coming up. Let's call a crawl. It's in a far, far away galaxy, blah 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 blah. The Jedi and blah blah blah. That's exposition. Yeah, that means that the yes. And in another movie, maybe we see first this map of the world, and then zooms into that place, or an anime opening, and in the anime opening they are trying to expose every character and try to kind of resume all the things that's happening there. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to doing exposition. What do you do in exposition? You are presenting your characters, your world, and then you're saying, hi, that's what I do, that's the man, and he does this thing. What happens there after exposition? After exposition, the audience can, the people that you're talking to, can now understand what this story is going to be about. So what's this story to be about? First in exposition I put this little chicken. Thanks Solcorra for the inspiration. So this is this little chicken, and then we are going to the second part of the story and present conflict. We are presenting now like maybe another character or a situation or something that happened here. Maybe an earthquake, anything can be that changes how things were before in my exposition, presenting a conflict for the character or for the story or for the, or I don't know, whatever you want to do. If it is an abstract thing, it's photography, it's also conflict is there, but we'll talk about that later. So this story, the chicken is presented with a snake. In Spanish it would be culebra. Yeah. So now we understand this problem for the chicken. He may be eaten by this snake. This is an external conflict, a conflict outside the little chicken mind. Yeah, we'll talk about the internal conflicts later. Don't worry about it. So first, for this conflict to appear, I have to present first the chicken and let you know that you like this chicken. And now there's a snake. So you care about the little chicken and this snake's about to eat it. Yeah. And then as part of the conflict, the highest part of the conflict is when all things are going to unravel to an end. And this little part, it's called the climax. When you are making a drawing, for example, you see the light part and the dark part, and this middle ground is called the terminator. It's super important. Here in storytelling, this part between the conflict and the end of the conflict is called climax, and could be this. For example, the snake is about to eat the little chicken, so the chicken is frightened. Now it's even worse than just presenting the snake. First, the conflict is there's a snake, and the climax is the chicken is about to die. He is about to die, or the snake is about to eat. It's this climax where the story is about to end. Because if the snake eats the chicken, the story ends there. If the chicken runs away, maybe we can continue, but this little conflict ends. And then this next conflict about running away. But in this case, after the climax, which is the highest part of the conflict, the most interesting one, the most interesting one is we come with the last part of this. If this climax is the end of the conflict, we have to then go to the resolution. In this resolution, for example, an eagle comes by and takes away the snake, and the chicken is safe. Yeah, and then the story ends. Yes, I wanted to save the chicken because I want to end it in a high note after all the evilness in the class before this. Let me... A ver. All right. So we have this little story: exposition, conflict, climax, resolution. Just remember, climax is not an outside part of the conflict. It's just a type of conflict, the most important part of the conflict. Just that. And if you are like a normal person and you care about this chicken, you have this feeling of the most crucial part is the climax. But this climax would not be crucial if there was no exposition. If I don't know what this little chicken was before this, I will not feel this intense emotion in this part of the climax. There's a little story happening also when you see a picture, and there's like a little exposition, conflict, climax, and resolutions in there. But we're talking about moving image, like animation or live action or whatever you want to do. Yeah. You know, if you read a lot of writing books and all that, there's different names for these stages, but it's the same. It's like presenting the problem, and then there's the end of the problem, and it's all the story is done. When you're trying to tell a joke, when you're trying to tell a story about your life to your friend, that you always put them first in context. And if you're not very organized with your words, you might have this thing of, hi, blah, 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 but I forgot to tell you. And you put in some exposition and then continue with the story, because you think that in that moment they need that exposition to feel the same thing that you felt in that part of the story. Yeah, and for example, and he cheated on her, but remember that time when she cheated on him, and so that way you don't feel bad about that problem or something like that, and that's kind of a sloppy storytelling, because you should have said that before going to that part, not interrupt the story in the middle. Yeah. So prologues are exposition. Yes, they are. So what we have this simple story, but if the story is a little bit more complex, things will happen differently. What do I mean with things will happen differently? For example, the story is 2 hours long, and it's a Pixar movie or something like that. You cannot do this like, all right, I have like 90 minutes to tell my story, so I'm putting 15 minutes for exposition, and then a conflict of, I don't know, 60 minutes, and then 15 minutes of resolution. That the things doesn't work this way, because it's too long. Nobody's paying you attention for that in this way. So we have to make it a little trick. I'm putting this out. So we have the timeline. This is the time that passes in our story. I want to use this. It's better. Yes. And here we're going to put another metric. We'll talk about it later. So when I say this first, we have conflict, exposition, and then conflict, and then climax, and then resolution. This can be like a biggest chunks of your story. It's kind of a small trick to do this, like 1/4 of the movie, 1/5. This 3/5, and this is 1/5, something like that. But this can be broken. Let's not think about this first. I mean, it's too much information. We don't have that much time. Remember, climax is in the edge between those two, and it's part of the conflict. So this doesn't mean that I will spend like 15 minutes talking about how, I don't know, Egypt was or something like that. This means that this part is important to establish how things work, but they have to have conflict too. I can make an exposition about various characters, various locations, anything. And inside this part, probably there are little conflicts between characters. And a lot of exposition. Exposition. but there are little conflicts here. I put in like they don't go along very well. For example, when you saw Harry Potter the first time in the exposition, wait a minute, 30 seconds. Estoy en clase, no pueden, ¿qué pasa?
¿Cómo es lo de Candelaria?
Les he dicho que se lleve, mira, le he puesto en el chat incluso la cosa blanca, el caño y el vaina del dióxido de carbono.
Ya, ¿y los barriles por qué no?
Porque no me lo han pedido en su guía. O sea que denle todo, y si tenemos que pagar a fin de mes, pagarán pues. Ya, si quieren manejarlo así, paguen, usen plata de nosotros, ya. Alright. I have this conflict now because there's like a... We have this first part of Harry Potter film, the first Harry Potter film, and I remember this well. They're in a train, and there is Harry talking with Hermione and Ron. And now we have this kind of little conflict between Ron and Hermione because she knows everything and he is stupid. And then Malfoy comes in and he treats them very badly. So I put in there another conflict. In the exposition, I'm exposing that this little boy is mean to this group of friends. That's an exposition of a conflict. Later on the story, I put we're going to go forward, and we have this conflict. And in this conflict, I can have little expositions. In these expositions, we have some things that maybe are in the past of a character that I didn't have the time to put in my first part of this storytelling. For example, here I have this new teacher. Let's keep Harry Potter, the new teacher. And in this part, I know that this new teacher is a werewolf. Spoiler alert. But they didn't tell me that here. They told me this here. And him being a werewolf is an exposition because I'm explaining something. I'm putting new information in the story. And it didn't necessarily need to be in the start of the story. We are giving them all that they need to know bit by bit. That we are picking what they need to know now and what they will need to know later. Yeah. But we have to be very careful here because when we have these people, we expose this maybe too much conflicts, little conflicts, and the story ends, and there are things that they didn't have a resolution. We end with this bitter taste in our mouth, like, and what happened with that guy, and what happened with that situation, and what. When people ask a lot of questions in the end of the movie, it means that the movie was not clear about a lot of things. So we have this little conflict, this position. There are probably a little resolutions of these conflicts because, for example, Hermione and Ron didn't get along because I said so. One is a genius and the other is stupid. But in halfway in the movie, they fight an ogre and they now are friends, so they get along very well. So this is this resolution of this little conflict. It can happen here, little resolutions, little expositions, and of course a lot of conflict development. What happened with all this stuff? This resolution of this fighting the ogre for Hermione and Ron had before a lot of these things like how do you say, little bits that they try to get along and they couldn't. Yeah. So, but here in exposition, I expose the first and main problem. There's this main problem. There's Voldemort thing here, and I have exposed here that Voldemort is more and more present. So Harry must face it in the climax. He in the climax faces one of the teachers, like always does. It's the same thing. Ash Ketchum fights Team Rocket or whatever you want. Happens here. The final battle, the final conflict. It can be a physical battle, it can be an internal battle, depends on the story. And it's the most intense part because we know as spectators that if they kind of end the problem there, the world will change forever. Their world will change forever. So this is the most important part. This is the resolution of the most important conflicts. It's the climax. A lot of little conflicts can be resolved in one climax. Yes, you can hold a lot of things. Like in One Piece, it holds a lot of things. One climax, the same thing happens here. After this climax, after telling what happened after the final showdown, we have resolution. And resolution is what happened after the aftermath. I don't know, our heroes are 10 points for Gryffindor. Gryffindor steals the cup, I don't know. The boy stays with the girl, or everybody dies, or whatever. It's just what happened after. It can be rewarding or not. It can be good or bad. It doesn't matter. It just means that it's the end. What happened after. And they live happily ever after, for example. And then she turned into foam in the sea, for example. And then Scar was eaten by hyenas, was one resolution. And then Simba, roar into the sky and everything turn green. It's another resolution. And then they had a baby. It's another final resolution. But we know that this is kind of complex. It's not just that step 1, step 2, step 3. It's like inside the step 1, there are little parts of 2. Inside little part 2, there are little parts of 1 and 3. And then is the resolution of step 2, and then is the step 3. And in this step 3, normally I would not expose nothing if there were no sequel. But if there is a sequel for this movie or series, probably I will expose the next problem or start the first complex. But if I don't have a sequel, I don't need this. It's all just resolution. If I expose something new, it cannot be a conflict. It at much can be just, I don't know, a new dog or something not very, something that does not bring conflict. Because if I put conflict here, the conflict didn't end. This is the end game for conflict. If I put conflict here, this means this will go on because I have something to resolve now. Yeah. I can tell this story in any way I want. Let's say, for example, I have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sequences of this story. And I don't have to tell them chronologically. I only need chronological order for 7. And probably 1. Or maybe I can put 2, 3, 1, 5, 4, 6. I don't know. This doesn't matter, but this structure stays. I need to tell what are these things, what's the problem with these things, and how are this problem resolved, and what happened after it gets resolved. Just that. And we have my little story ended. Yeah. That's the nutshell of the stories. It's a lot more complex, but you only need these to get going. Right. I'm gonna read whatever you have to say. Yeah. And there's like, since we only have 1 hour and you want to sleep, I would not be here. Yes, there's the path of the hero of 1,000 faces, facing the dragon. There's a lot of writing about this. We just need this: exposition, conflict, climax, and resolution. We don't need more than this to continue. Now, that was just the first metric, the Y dimension, for example, the time dimension. We have another dimension for storytelling, and this is the human part. It's called intensity. Yeah, well, I'm going to put this here and put something like narrative. Narrative intensity, or if not, story intensity. All right. What do I mean by what does narrative intensity means? When you make art, I have reached this conclusion. All art is communication, but not all communication is art. Yeah. When we do this art, we are communicating things. I know that people say to you that draw for yourself, do things for yourself, and blah 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 blah. But I do not agree with that concept at all. Just maybe a little part, because we are making these things to communicate something. If we don't communicate something, why do we make these things? I mean, you have it in your head. Well, you can make something for yourself, but it would be like talking to yourself. So that is therapy for you, all right, but still it's a communication between you and yourself. So you can avoid that communication part. Whenever you try to make a drawing or something, you have to think about other people. Don't be like self-centered. The world doesn't go just around you. So what this narrative intensity means? It means that this communication, this art, is going to have a physical and emotional response or psychological response on the audience. You are going to make people feel things in their head and in their bodies. Yes, you are. For example, you go to the movies way before the pandemic started. You see maybe Interstellar or a horror movie or something that you like. And if you fucking cry it, you have a physical response. If you grab your seat with strength because you were in tension, you have physical response. If you start laughing, you have physical and emotional response because you're feeling happy and you are laughing for cry out loud. You are making sounds. You are having a physical reaction to this thing presented to you. And if this art has a lot of narrative intensity, it will make your response bigger, deeper, stronger. And when you are a kid, you have a very low bar for this narrative intensity, and you remember all these series or movies of your childhood with a lot of emotion because they make you feel narrative intensity to the skies. And in the adult life, it happens also. You don't forget easily these things that impact you. Not every communication affects all people the same because, of course, you can talk to your mom the same way you talk to your body. I mean, you can say, hey, bitch, to your mom. I don't know. In my country, that would be a slap in your face. Yeah, but the communication cannot be changed for every people when you are doing this massive communication of a drawing or something for the internet or a movie or animation. Yeah. So, the response will be different according to your personal experiences and your psychological state and your character, your personal character. But nevertheless, you can control, you can plan to get the most response in the most quantity of people. Yes, because you're trying to impact society. You want to impact society, like the Joker, yes, but with art, not killing people, please. Yeah. And this. So, it's the first rule of visual storytelling and just any storytelling, that the climax is going to be in the top. Nothing, absolutely nothing, can be up the climax. Nothing can be more intense than the climax. If something is more intense than the climax, this is the climax, and this is not. And remember that I said the climax should be just before the resolution. This means that here we have to go down in intensity even a little bit. It could be this, it could be this. It doesn't matter. Let's say this, and this is resolution. We have this. And then we have this part of the conflict. And we have the conflict. It can be like put it in a simple way, like this, going up. And here is our exposition. This is the chicken story. Here's the chicken. Here's the snake. Here the snake about to eat the chicken, and here the snake was eaten by the eagle and the chicken was happy. But if our story is more complex, we use like we look closely, we can see this exposition, maybe conflict, maybe a exposition of place, something like this, and then this starts to go down, but goes down, this goes down. And then climax and the resolution, and the story ends. It's not that easy as putting all in the same place, and we can measure it by putting here numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, making 7 the highest, and this is 5, for example. This could be 6. I don't know, whatever you want. I recommend to use a scale of 1 to 10. And you put numbers here, how much is intensity here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here. And you have this rhythm of low, high, low, high, low, high. And you don't have to make this. You can be flat. It can be flat. It doesn't need to go up or down. It can be the same intensity in a lot of parts. It can be constant. It can be regular. Whatever you want. Even it can be in some cases, even the exposition can be a little bit start like here and be like this. Yeah, and then the conflict goes down, up, down, and up, and then the climax. Yes, you don't have to start in 1 or 2. There's no rule. The only rule here is that climax is on top of anything. Just keep this, and everything will be alright. Yeah, but remember the first things that I told you the past class about this contrast and affinity. If you have all too high, it will be boring. If we have all too low, it will be boring because there's no change. Like a relationship, no change. Next. Because our brain is made for adaptation. We need to live constantly better. And if something stays the same, it stops making sense for our brain and tries to make it take a lot of more of better things. So you have to keep in mind when you do your story put away this. When you do your story, you have to keep in mind this, that if you make a bland story, it will have this. You make a joke and nobody laughed. Or you start a joke and everybody start laughing, but they don't laugh at the end. Or you make a great joke. You have to build up expectations. We have to build up intensity. You can think about these animes fights, classic cliche of the bad guy just using like 10% of their power to fight the good guy, and the good guy is, oh my god, it's just 10%, and then goes to 50, 80, and then finally they fight in the equal state. That's because there's a little storytelling in the fight itself. If the bad guy I'm going to 100% dead, end of the story. And we will be like, what? I didn't want to hear this. It's kind of, that's a bad story. Yeah, so we have to build this up. You cannot make the final fight in the first chapter. I know you might say, oh, but I saw the final fight in this sequence of this thing, and just imagine you see this final fight of this anime in the first chapter. Is it worth it looking all the anime if you saw the best part already? And you know how it ends? I don't think so. But, and also, if I have these peaks of intensity, if you might say, well, right, I will start in 6, I go to 7, and then end with 6. This is a great story. But there is so little change. It's like using this gradation of, this is pure black, and I want to make a not so black, and I use this color. What the fuck? It's almost no contrast. It's boring as hell. What happens here? Your story will be, wow, it's interesting, it's amazing. The time passes by, and it's the same. So yeah, I have these 15 minutes of your story, and this thing happening has the same intensity, almost the same intensity of this starts losing sense. When you have these fights, for example, in, I don't know, any series, and nobody dies, and there are no stakes, you start caring about the characters, because there are no stakes. Nothing bad can happen. We all have this low intensity. And when the stakes are too high all the time, that becomes normal. And it's also ends in a boring situation. You have to play along with all these ups and downs. You can even make corpse. But you can make a lot of maybe go down. Or if you want the highest contrast of all, this will be a 7, for example. Yeah? But you want to beat up this will be a shock. Nobody will be expecting this. And this for be an intense narrative intensity, the highest point, we have to present it versus the lowest one. So right before this, I will put a 1. And then we are having up, and we have this false climax, and we are feeling, all get solved. But no, we are going to solve it here. And this is over the top over this. Maybe you have watched a movie and this is how it ends, and the movie doesn't end and continues. This is how it ends, and the movie doesn't end and it continues. And it's exciting and more exciting and more exciting because you're not expecting this. Yeah, that's because they put this low point just before the climax to make a high contrast impression of you. This is a trick. It's hard to pull out. Yeah, I don't recommend doing these kind of things in the first place, but just to let you know that they exist. Alright, so now I know what are the parts of the story. I know what narrative intensity is and how to put this intensity in my story and how to I going to tell my joke or my thing, what happens. Alright, but that's not everything. I have narrative intensity. For you that you are beginners and you're starting this, are you going to make this equal to visual intensity? Yeah, you remember this. Narrative intensity will be at the same with visual intensity. They will go grab by the hand and they will walk to the horizon. Later, when we master this, we can break this relationship, but not now. We have to stick to this first. And what this visual intensity means? If you remember my first class that was not recorded, I talked about contrast and affinity. And what is contrast? Contrast means difference, which means higher visual intensity. And affinity, it means the same thing, similar. Better this way, different and similar. It means lower visual intensity. If we make this formula to our structure graph, and this works for everything, even the classes, but I did not prepare this to be this fun, so if I prepare the class with this storytelling thing, it will be the best class of all, but it's work, guys, it's work. So, what happens here? Remember our first chicken story? It's like this, something like this, yeah. This means that here's affinity, and here the contrast is going up, and here is the highest contrast, and here the contrast goes down, which means also that affinity is going up. I don't know if you catch what I'm talking about right now, because if you don't catch this, the next part, the next 15 minutes will be like, what the fuck is all this? Yeah. High contrast means difference, means it's different, which it's equal to visual intensity. Low contrast or affinity means that things are similar, which can be translated to low visual intensity. And if we remember that visual intensity goes along with narrative intensity, it means that the parts of the story that have more narrative intensity should have more visual contrast, and the parts with less narrative intensity should have more affinity, visual affinity, and less contrast. And this happens in painting, same as in animation. For example, I'm going to quickly go to ArtStation. I will grab maybe an art of, I think that Acevedo art is kind of the best for this. I like this guy. I like that guy. Let me see. Let me see. For example, yes. Let's see this in action in painting. I have this. We are going to analyze quickly this picture. So, in my storytelling in this image, I'm going to tell about this relationship between this dragon and this little fish. It's kind of obvious, but what is this relationship? There are also other little stories about these little birds, I believe, or scales. I don't know what they are because they are far away. Maybe scales. But here is the interesting part. If I spend like 30 seconds to look up this picture and see that all this part is dark, which means it has affinity because it's only dark. Yeah, but in this part, this other half, there is contrast because it has some dark part and some bright part. There's light here. And not just that, they have this is a warm color, red, and all the rest is cool color, probably blue, bluish and green. So here I have high contrast of hue of the colors, high contrast of brightness, and also high contrast of shapes, because here all the shapes look the same, here all the shapes look the same, but this shape it's unique, and this shape is also unique. I don't see another fish going this. If there were another fish here, there would be a problem in communication. If this fish will be alongside with maybe 4, 5, 6 fishes, it will be a problem in communication. I'm telling this story about this dragon and this fish using contrast and affinity to tell my audience where the climax of this painting is, where to look at. When you saw Ethan or maybe Ahmed Aldori or other artists talking about lead the point of attention of your audience, whether you want them to see, it's using contrast and affinity. You always will see the more contrasting part. The part with affinity, you only need one look and you have all to figure out because it's the same. But in the contrasting part, you have to spend a little more time because there are different things to identify here. Yeah. But this thing will not be crap if this part will not exist. I mean, let's check it again. Oh, I see this movie, but if I have this and put just this, or even so, just this, boring, because there is no contrast, there's just affinity. I put in this fish, and it's a little bit more interesting, because I now have a little contrast, there's no much intensity. Maybe I put this. And here I have a little story. It has this intensity. I know how there's different shapes, but with all the picture complete, I have a lot more to contrast. This just works because this part works because this part exists. And if this part weren't this big, this little guy will not be the same thing. You will not feel the same if this doesn't exist. For there to be contrast, you need to have affinity. If everything will be contrast, there will be no contrast at all. For example, if all people are good, there will be no good people because it's all the same. You need bad people to tell that someone is good. If all are the same, they are no good nor bad, just are. The same happens with that image. If you don't use contrast, for contrast to exist, you have to have affinity. You don't use affinity, you're now having troubles telling your story because you have no point of comparison. Yeah, the fish about to be eaten is not a war cry to Sol Korra, or maybe it is. We will never know. Yeah. She's not here, so she cannot defend herself. All right. So, we understand this now. Remember, I know the parts of the story. I know about visual intensity and story intensity. But how can I bend these things to my will. There are a lot of elements that the man is managing in this moment. So what are these things that he has to manage? And this will be the end of the class. After this part, we may talk like a little more, and I have nothing more to say. We have visual component, and we are going to have to, for example, manage them. With, or better word for this, control that. With contrast and affinity. What do I mean by this? First, just a quick selection of visual components. There's a lot of theory about this. There's a lot of books that tells the different things, but I tend to agree to this classification you were about to see. Space, like space that, yes, space. Line, shape, tone, color, movement, and rhythm. I know that even Proko says that tone is a part of color, but I disagree. It's color that is a part of tone. Yes, this is more. This is the data of everyone. All get eaten by tone. Tone is the god of visuals. Why? Because I can take out space, I can take out lines, I can take out shapes, I can take out color, I can take out movement, rhythm, I can take out everything. But if I take out tone, there's nothing. Nothing. We will talk that in another class. Yes, the first and the most important lesson of this is always question everything. Even question me. Maybe one of you can say that Contreras is a, but research it, learn. I can be mistaken. Everybody can. Absolutely everyone can be mistaken. Always question everything, everyone. All knowledge. You have to search for new things to be. That's why I like to teach, because if I teach you this, I'm giving you a shortcut to knowledge. And then with this shortcut, you can go further than myself. You can reach further places than me, because I'm tired. It took years for me to learn this, but it may took you months. So you have these years of advantage to do more newer things. That's why I think that art is like it's really like sciences. In art, we use the scientific method, but we are not conscious of it. So, just to wrap this up, I have a space, line, shape, tone, color, movement, and rhythm. Just imagine these are your weapons. These are your weapons for your fight. You're going to fight this story that your friend gave you. This is the script, and you have to make this storyboard. And you have all these elements. What does space mean? I'm going to use flat space. I'm going to use deep space. I'm going to use this wide angle lens, or maybe I'm going to put all the general shots, first detail shots, three-quarter shots. I don't know. I have a lot of choice here, and I have to use my contrast and affinity in space to do that. Maybe space is like your shield. Something like that. I pick in a shield. Maybe you should pick a line. What's line? Line is this phenomenon created by your eye. Line really doesn't really exist. It's just a phenomenon caused by you're moving your eye. We talk about this if we ever make a class about line. but we are picking line. We're picking a whip, so it will be a straight line. It will be a curved line. It will be diagonal, horizontal, vertical. It will left to right, right to left, up to down, down to up. I don't know. Maybe you don't want the whip or the shield. Maybe you want shape. And for shape, we can make this is like magic spells. I am a magician, so I will use shape. So my character will be a circle, and this other character will be a square, and all the city will be squares, and then there's the triangle character coming in. I don't know. Maybe all the clouds are triangular, or maybe all the buildings are pyramidal, or are based on that basic shapes. A little bit more complex, but based on that. And shape creates this style of things. This I know this artist draws like that because he used the same shapes and he used the same resolution for whatever he does. Yes. So shapes are like your magic school. You know to manage shapes. But maybe you don't want to do these shapes because if you see, for example, a Cartoon Network show, they will have a lot of control over shapes and space, but no tone control. They are no lights, no darks. They're all almost the same. It's like when you see Big Bang Theory or any comedy in Sony or whatever channel there exists, there's the same lighting with tone that changes. You have control over the quantity of light, tone. Not use the quantity of light, but the reflectiveness of the materials. Tone for this will be like a cheat. You are the avatar of the sun. You can make people blind, you can make people see, and you want to say, hey, look at this, hey, look at that, I control everything. This is like a Joker card. It works for everything. Yeah, with tone you decide with tone if they can see or not see anything. I'm going to use this darker tone so you can see this shape. But if I did not use this different tone, you will not be able to see it. For example, you close your eyes and you don't see shit. You all see black. That's because you erase all the light. There's no tone. Or maybe I put a lot of light and you see everything white because yet there's no escape. You see all white. There's no tone. It's just one tone. If everything has the same tone, you will see nothing. You will see just a bland square of any part of the grayscale, nothing more. And maybe you don't want to use tone. You for example, you can use affinity tones, making all lighter tones, and then for contrast, you put the bad guy in a darker, really dark tone. So there are light beams fighting this dark beam, for example. If you don't want the tone, maybe you have a trusty sword color. And with color, as we see in the past class, we have the hue, the saturation, and of course the brightness of the color. And you have this a lot of versatility. You can control the colors, like in Kung Fu Panda, they control the saturation of the parts. The sad parts have low saturation. The action parts have a lot of saturation. I mean, the sad parts are desaturated, and the fun parts are very saturated. For example. Oh, maybe you want to use, I know, a spear, like movement. Movement is the most primitive of all of this. This is for barbarians. You want movement because you want them to feel the movement of the action in their skin. If you have ever saw 300, there's these parts of the fighting that is slow motion, and you feel all the physics in every shot, and then jumps to fast forward, and then slow motion, and then fast forward, and then slow motion, and this change of speeds, it creates this contrast, and not just speed but direction, left to right, right to left, zigzag, up down. Things are moving forward, and not just that. Because your eye, if you see the early Dragon Ball, like Goku versus Freezer, the sky is like explosion here, explosion here, explosion here, explosion here, and your eye is moving one place to another, one place to another. You are in constant stimulation, visual stimulation. Movement creates a lot of impact. It's like a Warhammer, something like that. very, very strong. It's very hard to master also. You can hurt yourself, you can ruin your story not using movement correctly. And there is rhythm. Rhythm is like the flow of water, is like Kung Fu. Rhythm lets you tell your things in a way. You move people, let's be calm here, and after this part, I'm going to increase my voice and make it something like that. I put this spike of my voice to make you maybe jump or maybe be upset or something. We have this rhythm, it's like in music. It's the pacing of my stories, the pacing of my contrast and affinity. I'm going to be this. I'm just like this transformer direct on the action. Or I'm like a European director. It's slow talking. Or maybe I am George Lucas and it's like a classic rhythm. Or maybe I am like a crazy man that made Mad Max, that is a genius, and that's action, but now higher action, and now higher action, and now higher action, and now higher, and it stays all the movies action, but higher. There's more intense action every time. So it's a crescendo of action. That's a rhythm of crescendo rhythm, for example. And you might think, wait a second, I have my story. That is just a little chicken getting eaten by the snake, and I have to control all these 7 visual components and control all their contrasts and subcontrast and sub-affinity in each of them to tell my story. This is a crazy shit. There's no possibility for me to calculate all these things. Yeah, but don't be scared, because the reality is that you don't have to think all these 7 things at the same time, because you don't have to pick all the weapons. You don't go to war grabbing a sword with one hand, a lance with the other, and with your mouth grabbing a hammer and the shield with your back. You don't put all your weapons at the same time. You pick whatever makes you comfortable. You tell, I want to be a master of pace. I want to be a master of that. For example, if you've seen Wes Anderson movies, the guy is a master of pace. He uses a lot of symmetric shots. He is well aware of the balance, the weight in the shot. If you see the Wachowski brothers, they have this. There's different control of space. There's a lot of deep shots. And if you see, I don't know, Steven Spielberg, he is better at rhythm than anything else. He has the best rhythm. He's like magic to make you listen to his story. Something like that. You don't have to be the best in everything. You just have to pick the best for you and the best for the story. And this is the end. We have only 8 minutes more. For example, I have this story about a woman that's inside a cell for all the time being captured by a bad entity, and then she runs away. So I have this little square of the cell. I will probably use a lot of space control, because if I don't control the space in this particular movie, it will be boring, because it's the same space. I have to make it look different and entertaining for each part of this story that's going to last like 1.5 hours in the same place. But I probably won't control line, because I cannot move the bars, or maybe I won't control color, because she can change clothes. The only color that will be there will be the dawn and the sunset, and nothing more, if there is any, because maybe she is just bright and dark and just that. And maybe probably won't use a lot of tone control, because she cannot control the light, and so So though I cannot control it, it will not be like organic. So I choose to grab space and rhythm and movement. Why movement? Because I can move my character and I can move the camera. So I'm going to pick this tree for this particular story. Problem solved. For example, I have these two. Let's think about Avatar, and they pick colors for different countries, so they can mean that green is for earth, fire is red, blue is aqua water, and this yellowish is for air, and there I have this control of colors, and then it is done. I cannot choose tone to control in a comedic cartoon because cartoons with do not tend to have a lot of tonal contrast. It's hard to make. It costs money, so I'm not using tone. Maybe this is a race of I don't know, any kind. Probably I will use line because it's the fucking place where the cars are. It's a line, it's really a line. So I use a line because they have to turn around and accelerate and everything. Maybe this is a movie about dancing. I will probably choose rhythm over the others. But and how do I know what are good for my story? Actually, you may never know. This is where your personality gets in, because you pick what's good for you or what you think it is. Not everybody talks the same, so now nobody can talk like you, and that is that you pick what how to tell this story. We can pick the same story and maybe pick even the same components, and we end with a different story because we use them differently. So that's the part of your expression. That's part of your art or your communication. Well, I would like to make these classes about each of these, but I don't want to bother you now. So if I make another class, probably will be about space. That's the fun, but it's the hardest one to master. The hardest one to master, you may know that it's the hardest one to master because you can draw in foreshortening. So it is the hardest one. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't draw with perspective of foreshortening, so they don't have this control of space like a lot of people can have. Right. That's. I think that will be all. Just want to note that if you pick, like, for example, like picking shape and tone to actively control this shape and tone around all my story, doesn't mean that the other 5 do not exist. It just means that the other 5 are going to follow the rules of the world, of the normal world. What do I mean by this? They cannot cease to exist. They exist all the time, but they will hide from plain sight because you are dancing in front of them with your picks. I mean, I have this movie and I'm shooting real life. I cannot make the people faces change of color, or I cannot change the color of anything. I cannot make a green sky or something like that in real life. No, so I'm going to manage all the other things. But in animation, for example, if you see JoJo's Part 4, the sky is yellow all the time, almost. The fucking sky is yellow. So they are grabbing color and they're telling something with color. But the shape is not important, not that much of importance for them, because all the characters kind of look the same, for example, something like that. but that the houses stays the same. In anime, all the houses are almost the same as in real life, so they are not grabbing these shapes things to express nothing with that. They're using another elements. Other elements have more importance for their stories. But if I choose to not control any of this, that doesn't mean that they do not exist. That's just sloppy storytelling. What will happen? That people will read messages that you didn't want to tell, and there all these stories about around your story will be born because you weren't clear about what you wanted to say because you didn't use anything. I know that there are some artists that create without thinking, but for me that's I respect that. I do respect these artists that draw without thinking, but it's harder for them to improve because they are not aware of what they are doing, of what are their choices, and they cannot teach correctly because no one can think like them if they don't know what they think. So something like that. Yeah. So if any of you do not like to think before drawing or before telling something, this might help you to know where are your mistakes and what you can go better, because if you separate every element, you will know, I have this lacking skill in this, I have this lacking skill here and this here. For example, myself, I'm not the best craftsman. I don't have the best drawings, but I can plan things for other people to make. All right. Now I have to end this because I want you to have a break of at least 30 minutes before Space That class. If anyone has a question, I will read it now. If not, we are done. Thanks for staying with me all this time.
Right, folks, we're going to be starting